This is my Xperia 1 Mark V. I pre-ordered it soon after it was officially announced. Received it on the 27th of June. Had it just over 2 months. A few weeks ago, I went on holiday to Portugal, where it's unfortunately got wet. My previous phone, the Xperia XZ1, I had become accustomed to literally being able to take this thing snorkeling in the sea because the water resistance was that good. It's got an IP68 rating, similar, well, same as this, although this one is also stated to have an IP65. Unfortunately, this one was not even submerged for more than a few seconds. Certainly not in the sea. It was in potentially chlorinated water. It was at a splash park. On entering the park, we were greeted with huge queues in order to obtain an RFID wristbands to be able to use the lockers. Having had experience with the XZ1 and how good its water resistance was, I didn't think much of just keeping it in my pocket whilst we went on the rides, given that it was not going to be underwater for any length of time, and was really just getting wet now and then. It was a very hot day, 38 degrees C, had minimal time required to dry it off again afterwards, having rinsed it with fresh water. At the end of the day, everything seemed fine. I dried the phone off multiple times and inspected it. There was no sign of any water having got in the phone. We took a half-hour journey home where I was using the GPS navigation, and again it seemed okay until we stopped at a shop just before we got back to our apartment to get some groceries. My wife went in, I stayed in the car. At this point I had another look at the phone and realised that some condensation had formed on the inside of one of the camera lenses, well, inside the camera glass here. Now, I have never had to repair one of my own phones before, but I have taken apart and repaired phones for friends and families many times over the years, and figuring that the warranty was now already void, I didn't think much of just dismantling this thing to get it dry. Anything electronic, it's got water in it, the first thing you need to do is remove the power source, and then the second thing is to get it dry. Now obviously, with phones being what they are these days, not removable batteries, this is not as simple as it could be. Having got back to my apartment, I proceeded to heat the thing up with a hairdryer to soften the adhesive around the outside edges. You can just about still see actually the mark from using a suction cup to then gently remove the back. Having done so, I was greeted with this. There was no obvious signs of moisture in the phone at this point, other than still on the back of this lens. But then inspecting that, I noticed there was some white fur beginning to form around this area here. This is one of the MEMS microphones, MEMS microphone. Audio signal goes in there, it's passed through this board and into the back of this little sensor. At this point, I had no tools with me to be able to remove anything further. I let it dry out thoroughly. I put it in the oven. We had a digital oven which could be set down to 30 degrees. I set it to 40 degrees, being cautious of the battery, and left it in there for half an hour to make sure it's thoroughly dried out. Again, I mean, we were in a very hot environment anyway. It was 30 odd degrees most of the time we were away. We had air conditioning in the apartment, so it was cooler there, but obviously then also helping to dry it out. Having powered it back on once I was happy it was dry, everything seems perfectly normal in terms of operation, except for no radio or network coverage. So the Wi-Fi works, the Bluetooth works, NFC works, but the cell tower access, radio, and the GPS location services do not work. At startup, you will see shortly, it briefly says no SIM card, although the SIM card is recognised, as can be seen once logging in the network. we can see that it has recognised the SIM card. Although here it says calls and SMS are temporarily unavailable. I have attempted to turn the radio back on in the hidden menu. It says mobile radio power off. I try turning it on. If I go out and back in, it's back off. If I try and select radio band, it always reports unsuccessful. At this point, we need to investigate further, look for more signs of water damage. With the phone secured to the bench with some blobs of blue tack, because otherwise it's very slippery and slides around a lot, can proceed to remove screws, secure this back panel. There are some long ones, like this one. Some shorter ones, like this one. And there is this single small black one. I previously made a diagram of where all these screws go so that they all go back in the right place. Final one here. You can pry this up carefully by just putting a fingernail or something under this piece here. We have the wireless charging, NFC, various antennas. There are further antennas down here. Here we can see the top MEMS microphone, or the left hand side. Here, you can't see it now because I've already cleaned it up, but there was an area of white fur where water had got in and onto the electronics whilst it was still powered on. To remove this end, screws down this end are all of the shorter variety. Some more antennas. The antennas connect through to the boards via these tabs on the back. There are spring contacts on the boards. It's the same up here. In fact, the microphone and the flashlight LED or camera flash on here connect through these pads to the main board via these spring contacts here. We have a RF cable link between the main board and this board here, presumably to connect to these antenna on here. And we also have a far more substantial data link this screw is the same as the previous ones I've removed from this area, and the shorter ones that are up this area. First thing to do now is disconnect the battery. With that disconnected, I'm happy to disconnect other need to remove the SIM card, micro SD card tray. Now we can remove this board. It's quite tricky because the first time, because it is bonded to the microphone ducting, it's still a bit sticky now. This little widget here is a port for directing audio from the microphone hole here through to the hole in the PCB here, so that it can get into the microphone here. I'm going to disconnect the camera modules. And remove this single screw which holds down the main board. This screw is different to all the others. It has a larger head and is longer. Here the front casing camera module, it's easier actually to disconnect this one as well first and then lift that module out of the way. I'm going to remove this camera module. Careful not to touch the lens. And then attempt to lift the main board out. Again, remembering that this end is fastened with adhesive to the microphone port. Underneath here there are connections to the display and the USB-C connector, so we need to be careful not to pull this end of the board up. I'm just lifting the front up for now. With the main board raised and the camera module out of the way, I'm just going to drop a tiny amount of isopropanol alcohol down here to soften the adhesive holding the battery in place. Give it a few minutes to run down inside. Having left it a few minutes, the battery should be able to be removed. I have removed this before, so this will probably come out easier than it will do the first time, but just remember, patience, be very slow. You will hear the glue gently creaking as it starts to release, at which point you will then be left with just adhesive at this end. It should be fairly easy to remove that. You can now see the main board is free to move with this large connector down to the USB-C port and then onto the display and touch panel. There are two sets of connectors on the back here. These can be gently popped off with a flat edge or a fingernail if yours is as long as mine have got. Again, just be careful not to bust off any of these tiny components which are very close to the connectors. Right then, the main board is free. We can see here on the main board the hole which allows audio through into the MEMS microphone. So again, similar to the bottom end, there is a small hole here. Sorry, I'm not able to focus that close. Audio goes through this ducting here, which is rubberized and sticky, bonded to the hole on the PCB, where it then passes into the microphone. And note that again, the area which should become wet and damaged, this small area here, is right next to this microphone. And again, that we can see under the edge of this microphone. Looking more closely at these microphone ports, I can actually see that there is like a kind of diaphragm in there, and that maybe that is intended to be the moisture barrier that prevents water getting through to the PCB at all, let alone through the board and leaking out around the microphone. And studying the inside of the glass camera lens on the back cover, it would appear that the water may have actually entered here. You can see discoloration, and this would I have studied this area next to the microphone up close previously. Having cleaned it, there were what looked like some pads that may have originally had a component on which had been completely sort of eaten away. I'm not going to make any further attempts to do anything with that now. I'm just going to reassemble the phone. Just going to inspect inside this mainboard. Most of the chipset and the radio gear and everything is covered with these metal plates. This is very common in electronic equipment. As you can see here, I can't see any sign of water damage in there. I don't think water's got in there at all. We have another one on the back, larger. Again, be careful if you're doing this. There are lots of very small components around the outside of this metal enclosure. These ones have got like thermal pads on to help dissipate heat onto the metal covers. Again, no sign whatsoever of moisture having got in there. Just also to note that this main board is composed of two boards sandwiched together. Although this must have been put together in some way, and so would seem like it could probably come apart, I'm not going to risk that, having no idea what the construction technique is, and risking possibly permanently adding further damage to the board. I also do not expect there to be any moisture in there, given that there is no evidence of moisture anywhere else on here other than right next to this corner here. So I'm going to reconnect the main board to the USB-C and display, which involves carefully aligning these and applying gentle pressure to click them back into place. Replace the cover. Similarly, replace this cover. Make sure they're all firmly clipped into place, back and front. reconnect the headphone jack that has just popped off. Camera connector out of the way, just avoiding the camera lens. Ensure the main board is well aligned and replace the single retaining screw. Reconnect camera module. Place this camera module. These battery adhesive do actually have tabs on to allow you to try and pull the adhesive out for removing the battery, but I prefer to try and leave that intact. Front facing camera. The micro SD and SIM card tray. Hook the little RF cable back into the little slot. Now, one of these batteries retained the board, one of these screws retained the board, the other one went through the speaker assembly first. So this one here retains the board. Reconnect the RF cable. Battery back in place. RF cable back in place. And this data link cable to the SIM card micro SD card ETC. Reconnect the side buttons, fingerprint sensor. Finally reconnect the battery. place the speaker assembly and antennas. Short screws. Various antenna assembly. Making sure it's well aligned. Long screws. I'll put in all the long screws first in case somebody is finding this useful. So long screw, long screw, to this top corner, long screw here, a long screw here, a long screw here, a long screw here, that's all the long screws. I've got 3 of the shorter screws, one here, one here, and one here. And then the final screw, the little black one, here. Reinsert the SIM and SD card tray. Replace the back cover. Hopefully she still works. Promising. obviously we've not done anything to repair it, so I still have no radio connectivity. At the end of my first disassembling, I realised I'd left out this interesting little square and blob of white goo adhesive. I'm sure it must have been in there for a reason, but I cannot recall for the life of me where it came from. If anyone can give me any pointers, that would be brilliant. Thank you. This is the damaged area of the board, or the obviously damaged area of the board, and here there may have been a component that has been completely eaten away. Just thought I'd add some closing comments regarding the water resistance of this phone. I've mentioned already that it's got an IP65 and IP68 rating. Now the 6, or the first digit in an IP rating, is to do with dust or solid particles. 6 means dust tight, no ingress of dust, complete protection. Not really concerned with that though. The second digit is to do with the water rating. Now for the IP65 rating, we've got water jets. Water ejected by a nozzle against enclosure from any direction shall have no harmful effects. Test duration 1 minute per square metre for at least 3 minutes. Water volume 12.5 litres per minute. Pressure 30 kilopascal, 4.4 psi, a distance of 3 metres. And for IP68, immersion 1 metre or 3 feet or more depth. The equipment is suitable for continuous immersion in water under conditions which meet which the manufacturer shall specify. However, with certain types of equipment, it can mean that water can enter, but only so that it produces no harmful effects. Test duration agreement with the manufacturer. Depth specified by the manufacturer, generally up to 3 metres. Well, let's see what Sony has to say in their specification. So what does Sony have to say in their specification? Durability, water resistant, IPX5/IPX8, dust proof, IP6X. So we're really only interested in this here. There is some small print. This device is water resistant and protected against dust. All ports and attached covers should be firmly closed. Do not put the device completely underwater or expose it to seawater, salt water, chlorinated water or liquids such as drinks. Abuse and improper use of device will invalidate warranty. The device has been tested under ingress protection rating IP65-68. Sony devices that are tested for their water resistant abilities are placed gently inside a container filled with tap water and lowered to a depth of 1.5 meters. After 30 minutes in the container, the device is gently taken out and its functions and features are tested. Note this model has a capless USB port to connect the charge. The USB port needs to be completely dry before charging. So we have an IP68 rating, yet in the small print it says do not put the device completely underwater. It seems slightly contradictory, but there we go. As I said, the phone, it did become underwater for short periods, nowhere near 1 meter, a few inches at most, and for no more than a few seconds at a time. The water probably was chlorinated, but not particularly strong. It was not strong enough to smell or give any kind of skin irritation. There was no like swimming pools. It was purely water slides with pools to land in at the ends. Have I just been unlucky with this one phone, or is this typical of the Xperia 1.5? I cannot possibly say. However, I would highly recommend not getting this phone wet, and would take its IP rating with a pinch of salt.